8 days after Jeff Hogue vanished, three teenagers stopped beside a hole in the Tennessee woods. From nearly 20 feet below, they heard a cough. The sound was so weak they almost missed it. Whoever was down there had survived freezing rain, mud, thirst, and 8 nights with no way out. 2 decades later, another man would become locked inside rock in Indiana, unable to move forward or backward while rescuers worked through the night. These were different accidents, but the same brutal lesson. Underground, a few inches of space can decide whether a person lives or dies. Jeff Hogue's ordeal began on December 21st, 1981. He was 34 and trying to borrow a friend's truck for a long drive to North Carolina. The truck would not start. In frustration, Jeff set off on foot through wooded country as freezing rain turned the ground slick and unstable. About a mile from the house, his footing disappeared. He slid through wet leaves and dropped into a sheer-walled sinkhole hidden in the terrain. The fall was roughly 18 feet. Jeff landed alive, but the walls around him were soft mud, too steep to climb and too weak to hold a handhold. His first objective was obvious: get back to the surface before the temperature fell. He dug steps into the wall and tried to pull himself upward. Each step collapsed under his weight. Mud peeled away beneath his fingers, and every failed climb returned him to the same cramped bottom. From above, the opening was close enough to see but too high to reach. The shaft offered no ledge, no solid root, and no reliable anchor. Freezing rain became snow. Meltwater entered the pit, but the same exposed conditions that supplied water also pulled heat from his soaked clothing. Jeff tried to collect the runoff. The accident report says he could not trap enough before it disappeared into the mud or evaporated. His next idea was more desperate. He tore apart his long underwear, tied the fabric to sticks, and attempted to build a crude ladder, but a ladder needs a foundation. The soft earth would not support it, and the structure failed before it could carry him to the rim. The problem had changed. Escape was no longer only about height. Jeff now had to preserve energy while cold nights and warmer days stressed his body. At night, he shook uncontrollably. During daylight, the pit warmed, increasing thirst while leaving him with no dependable container for water. He called toward the opening, but the sinkhole sat in wooded country away from regular traffic. Every shout cost energy and produced no answer. After several days, the accident report says Jeff began to hallucinate. That made every distant sound dangerous because hope itself could waste strength. He still tested the walls, still searched for something solid, but repeated attempts only damaged the mud and erased the few holds he had made. By then, survival depended on being noticed from above. Jeff could no longer solve the geometry of the pit from the bottom. 8 days after the fall, 3 teenagers were hunting squirrels in the area. They approached the opening and paused long enough to listen. A faint cough rose from below. The teenagers called into the hole, and Jeff answered with what strength he had left. For the first time in more than a week, the impossible distance between the bottom and the rim became a connection to another human being. The teenagers summoned help. Rescuers reached the site, lowered equipment into the shaft, and prepared to lift a severely weakened man through the narrow opening. Jeff was brought out alive and taken for medical treatment. Contemporary reporting described dehydration, hypothermia, and the effects of prolonged exposure. The most dramatic details, often repeated later, are not equally documented. What is certain is simpler. He survived 8 days in an 18-foot sinkhole. He survived because the fall did not incapacitate him. Melting snow provided at least some moisture, and 3 teenagers investigated a sound others might have ignored. 22 years later, on May 17, 2003, 20-year-old Gerard Watt entered Buckner's Cave in Indiana with 2 friends early on a Saturday morning. Unlike the Tennessee sinkhole, this was a planned cave trip. But the official accident summary describes Gerard as inexperienced, not an expert caver. Inside Buckner's Cave, the group crawled through low limestone passage until Gerard entered a narrow crevice positioned above a stream crawl. The root compressed around his body. At one point, a small rock obstructed the movement he needed to continue or reverse. Gerard became stuck. His friends tried to free him, but the confined passage gave them almost no angle for leverage. One friend stayed with him, The other began the difficult trip back through the cave to summon emergency help. That decision preserved two things at once. Harad was not left alone, and rescuers received a guide who knew the route to the obstruction. Hours passed underground. Because Gerard could not move enough to generate heat, damp cave air steadily lowered his body temperature. Rescue personnel and cave specialists entered with drills and other equipment. Their task was not to pull harder, but to change the rock around him. The crevice was too tight for rushed movement. Every tool had to be controlled so the rescuers did not injure Gerard or worsen the blockage. They worked through Saturday night, removing material around the small rock that prevented his body from sliding toward the larger passage below. Above ground, the rescue stretched toward morning. Below ground, progress was measured in tiny changes: a better tool angle, a loosened edge, a fraction more room. The key was not widening the entire cave. It was removing one obstruction at exactly the point where Gerard's body could change position. After roughly 17 hours in the cave, rescuers dislodged the rock. The geometry changed immediately. Gerard was able to slide down into the stream passage below, where there was finally enough space to move his arms and legs. With encouragement, he crawled out of the squeeze. Rescuers gave him food and water, then helped him begin the long exit. The danger was not over at the instant he became free. A cold, exhausted person still had to travel through the cave without falling or becoming stranded again. At about 6 on Sunday morning, Gerard reached the surface. He was treated for hypothermia but was otherwise reported uninjured. The rescue succeeded because his companions split their roles. Specialists brought the right tools, and the team solved the obstruction instead of forcing the victim. Both incidents reveal how misleading cave accidents can look from outside. Jeff could see daylight. Gerard was only inches from a larger passage. Yet Jeff lacked a solid surface to climb, and Gerard lacked the fraction of space required to rotate and slide. In both cases, strength alone was useless. The environment controlled the available movement, and repeated force risked making the problem worse. Jeff's survival depended on conserving enough life for discovery. Gerard's depended on maintaining body heat and breathing room until the rock could be altered. The timelines were radically different: 8 days alone in an open sinkhole and 17 hours surrounded by friends and rescuers inside a cave. But both men reached the same threshold, where the next successful action had to come from someone outside the trap. That is why preparation matters before entering cave country. Tell someone the route, carry dependable lights, dress for cold, and understand that rescue may take hours. It is also why bystanders matter. The teenagers who stopped at Jeff's sinkhole did not have specialized equipment. They simply listened and acted. And Gerard's friends did not waste all their energy on an impossible pull. One stayed, one exited, and professional help was brought underground. Survival stories are often remembered as contests of will. These two were also contests of geometry, temperature, communication, and timing. An 18-foot wall became uncrossable because it was mud. A small rock became a prison because it blocked one precise body movement. Jeff Hogue and Gerard Watt both emerged alive, not because the underground became forgiving, but because the problem was finally understood correctly. For another true survival story where a few inches changed everything, choose the next video on screen and subscribe for more carefully researched rescues.